All right, so are you ready? Are you ready for this? We're going to take a deep dive into this whole mass deportation thing. President Trump's proposals and like what could happen to the economy. It's a lot to unpack. It gets messy. It gets kind of shady in some places. We got some news articles, economic reports, even looked at like stock market analyses.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating. Most people just think about the people,
right?
The human impact, which is obviously huge. But like this goes way deeper.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about like winners and losers.
Okay.
It's a domino effect across entire industries.
Okay, so winners and losers, huh? I mean, that's kind of a blunt way to put it, but I guess that is economics sometimes, right? So who are we talking about here? Like, who are the winners and losers?
Well, let's start with the winners because this is where things get a bit shady. We're talking private prison companies.
Okay.
The big names like CoreCivic and Geo Group.
Oh, yeah.
Their stock prices actually jumped significantly after Trump's election.
Wait, seriously?
Yeah.
That's so messed up.
Yeah.
So, like, the stock market is basically betting on more people being detained.
Yeah. It's pretty grim when you think about it. Investors are anticipating increased demand for detention centers. More deportations, more people in detention equals more profits for these companies.
Oh.
In fact, some analysts are predicting like a potential 20% increase in their annual revenue.
Wow.
If these policies are fully implemented.
20%. Like, that's crazy. It's just crazy to think that, like, someone could profit off of this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's not just the prison companies, right? You mentioned all these different industries that could be impacted.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, think about it. All the logistics involved in mass deportations, we're talking transportation companies.
Right, yeah.
Like MVM Inc., CSI Aviation Services. They handle all the flights, buses, the security for detainees. Their contracts could just, skyrocket. We're talking hundreds of millions, maybe even billions of dollars flowing into this ecosystem.
And what about the tech side of things? I feel like I've read a lot about increased surveillance and stuff like that at detention facilities and along the border.
Exactly. Companies like Palantir Technologies, which already works with ICE, could see a huge surge in demand for their surveillance systems. We're talking facial recognition software, data analysis tools, all that stuff.
So you've got this like interconnected network of companies, and they could like potentially rake in massive profits from all this. And while like some sectors might see like these short-term gains, right? Yeah. Others are like facing potentially devastating consequences.
Yeah, right. Unfortunately, yeah. Kind of the flip side of this is pretty bleak. Think about all the industries that rely heavily on undocumented workers. Agriculture, construction, hospitality.
Of course.
These sectors could be crippled by mass deportation.
I see what you mean. I mean, we're already seeing labor shortages in these areas.
Yeah.
And then you're talking about removing this huge chunk of the workforce.
Exactly. And these industries often operate on like razor-thin margins. So even just a small increase in labor costs could completely wipe out their profits.
Right.
I mean, we're talking about potential bankruptcies, farms shutting down, construction projects grinding to a halt.
And like, it's not just about the businesses themselves, right?
Yeah.
This could have a huge ripple effect on the entire economy.
Oh, absolutely. Think about consumers.
Okay.
Like, what's it going to do to prices? We're talking about everything. Groceries, housing.
Yeah.
If farmers have to pay more for labor, that cost gets passed down.
Okay, so higher prices, but like what about actual shortages? Could we see like empty shelves at the grocery store?
Yeah, it's definitely possible.
Wow.
Especially in certain sectors. I was reading this Harvard Business Review article. They were highlighting a lot of concerns about the food supply chain.
Right.
Mass deportations could totally disrupt the production and distribution of food, which would lead to shortages and, of course, even steeper price increases.
So basically, our dinner plates could be a casualty of this whole mess.
Yeah.
That's pretty unsettling. And I imagine this impact wouldn't be evenly distributed across the country, right?
No, you're right. Some states and regions would be hit way harder than others. A study from the Brookings Institution found that states with large undocumented populations like California, Texas, Florida would likely face the most significant economic fallout.
Which makes sense. I mean, those industries are huge in those states.
Yep.
And we're talking about massive losses, too, like trillions of dollars.
This could shrink the U.S. economy by trillions of dollars.
Trillions.
Over the next decade.
Okay, now you're just messing with me. Can you break that down? How could it possibly be that much?
Well, think about it. We're talking about a huge reduction in the workforce.
Right.
Which means a significant drop in productivity.
Yeah.
Then you've got less consumer spending because people are out of work or worried about their jobs. And don't forget the impact on all that entrepreneurial activity. Undocumented immigrants start businesses at a much higher rate than native-born Americans. Removing them from the equation could stifle innovation and job creation.
So it's like this massive chain reaction.
Yeah.
And it just keeps rippling outward. You're painting a pretty grim picture here. Are there any potential upsides at all to this? Or is this just a complete economic disaster waiting to happen?
Well, it's important to remember that there are different perspectives on this. Some people argue that mass deportations could lead to higher wages for American workers.
Okay, yeah.
The idea is that with fewer workers available, employers would have to compete for talent and offer better salaries.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. But wouldn't those wage increases just be immediately eaten up by the higher prices for goods and services that we were just talking about?
That's true. That's a good point. And there's also no guarantee that those wage increases would actually even happen. The labor market is so complex. It's difficult to predict how it would react to such a drastic shift.
So basically, even the potential upside is highly speculative and comes with a whole bunch of caveats.
Exactly. And it's also worth remembering that, like, the economic impact is only one piece of this whole thing.
Right.
There's also the human costs to consider, the families and communities that would be torn apart. And that's something we really need to explore further.
You're right. I mean, we've been talking about, like, trillions of dollars in stock market trends and stuff, but I mean, at the end of the day, this is about people, right?
Absolutely.
Real families, real communities, like, being impacted by all of this.
Precisely. And it's not just the individuals directly affected. Think about the potential damage to social cohesion, the erosion of community trust. These are things that are hard to, like, measure economically, but they're absolutely vital to a healthy society.
Yeah. It's like this impossible balancing act.
Yeah.
On one side, you've got like these potential short-term gains for certain businesses. And then on the other side, potential long-term economic damage, social upheaval, and this massive human cost.
It really highlights the dangers of, like, short-term thinking. You know, we get so focused on immediate gains that we fail to see the long-term consequences.
So we've kind of laid out the potential disaster here, but, like, what can we actually do about it? How do we even begin to navigate this mess?
Well, honestly, I think it starts with awareness. People need to understand the full scope of this.
Right.
Both the economic and the human sides of this whole thing. And that means engaging in thoughtful dialogue, being willing to listen to different perspectives, and questioning assumptions.
I mean, it's so easy to just get caught up in the rhetoric, especially with something as politically charged as immigration.
Absolutely. That's why it's so crucial to be critical consumers of information. We need to seek out diverse sources, dig deeper than just the headlines, and just be wary of simple solutions to complex problems.
Yeah, and this isn't just some abstract policy debate either. You know, we're talking about real people, real lives hanging in the balance here.
Exactly. We need to approach this whole issue with empathy.
Yeah.
I mean, these are our neighbors, our colleagues, members of our communities. Their stories deserve to be heard.
So we've really unpacked a lot today. The potential winners and losers, the short-term gains versus the long-term risks, and of course, like, the profound human cost of this whole mass deportation scenario. It's heavy stuff.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. It's complex, it's messy, but by staying informed, engaging in, thoughtful dialogue, and remembering the human element, we can hopefully find a path forward that is both just and humane.
So you heard it here, folks. This whole mass deportation thing, it's not as simple as it might seem. We've got economic considerations, social implications, and a whole lot of ethical questions swirling around this. And yeah, it's easy to get lost in the numbers and all that, but remember, there are real people behind all those statistics. Families, communities, lives that would be changed. It's a tough conversation to have, but it's one we need to be having. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.